we're talking about curation today, and I think one way to describe minimalism is a well curated life.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I wanted to talk to you because I don't like just finding articles that back up my points, but I sent you this article this week about this one's from Bloomberg. It's an op-ed piece by Tyler Cohen, and it's called "Americans Own Less Stuff, and That's Reason to Be Nervous." First off, I totally disagree, and I think most data will actually back up that we don't own less stuff. What he means is we have access to more things like Kindle books as opposed to physical books.
We have less of a need for ownership.
Less of a need for ownership of physical items.
Right.
Like no longer do I need a cassette.
Right.
When I can have the album in my pocket or
You don't
unlimited
need a DVD.
number.
Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. So let's read this and let's try to talk about it, and we'll pick it apart a little bit, because I think this applies to the topic of curation and how we can have a well curated life. I think some of it has to do with access. So here's what Tyler Cohen says. Some social problems are blatantly obvious in daily life, while others are longer term, more corrosive, and perhaps mostly invisible. Lately, I've been worrying about a problem of the latter kind, the erosion of personal ownership and what that will mean for our loyalties of traditional American concepts of capitalism and private property. The main culprits for the change are software and the internet. For instance, Amazon's Kindle and other methods of online reading have revolutionized how Americans consume text. 15 years ago, people typically owned the books and magazines they were reading. Much less so now. If you look at the fine print, it turns out that you do not own the books on your Kindle. Amazon.com Inc. does. And my response to that is, so what?
It's like iTunes Music. I mean, we spend $10 a month.
Right.
We don't own the music. And
Right.
if we ever cancel that subscription, we lose the albums that we downloaded.
Right.
I mean,
But so think about, like, you and I used to get like GQ magazine in the mail, right?
Right.
And remember my basement, I had like big bins full of old GQs. I had ownership of them.
Yeah.
But the value isn't in the ownership of the artifact to me. The value is in the words themselves. If you're getting value from the book, you're getting value from the magazine or article, you're getting value from the music, it's not because you own that CD. It's because you enjoy listening to that. And I've become vehicle agnostic. I don't care whether it's on a CD. I own one CD. It's Parlor Hawk's second album, Parlor Hawk. It's in my car, because my car has one CD slot, and so
Is that not on the streaming platforms, or
it may not be. I know I have a downloaded version of it.
Yeah.
But Andrew is the one who did the soundtrack to the lead singer of that band did the soundtrack to our first documentary. And the good news is they're going to start working on we'll talk about this later, but they're going to start working on the soundtrack for the second documentary. Anyway, back to the article here. I do not consider this much of a practical problem. Yeah, me either. Although Amazon could obliterate the books on my Kindle. This has happened only in a very small number of cases, typically involving account abuse. Okay, so if someone's abusing the terms of the Kindle, of course they could obliterate it. It's not, however, in Amazon's interest to randomly go in and delete your Kindle collection.
right?
Or start messing with you and saying, oh, I don't want Ryan to read, Infinite Jest. I'm
Right.
going to remove this from his Kindle so he reads 50 Shades of Grey. Still, this licensing of ebooks, instead of stacking books on a shelf, has altered our psychological sense of how we connect to what we read. It's no longer truly ours. Good.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is great.
Yeah.
Because what he's saying is, has altered our psychological sense of how we can connect to what we read, connect to what we need, I would say.
Yeah.
It allows us to
like that.
more easily detach from physical ownership of artifacts that aren't adding value to our lives. Because it's up there in the cloud. Think of an album that you bought over a decade ago but haven't listened to since.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, dude, I had, when I was digitizing DVDs and CDs, like I remember I had that 100, 200 book of CDs, and like a lot of them were like burnt CDs that that someone had given me,
Right.
and I just had like the songs listed out. But I remember just like going through I probably threw 150 of them away because the vast reason why was because I was not listening to those, to 3/4 of those CDs.
Right.
I didn't see myself listening to them in the near future.
And if they're in the cloud, it's easy to let go of them because you'll still have access to them in the future. If you do want to break out that ABBA album and you want to listen to it, then you can. But if you don't, then you don't, and that's okay. You've detached from it.
Yeah.
These technologies enable us to detach more easily, and I think that's such a great thing.
Dude, you hit the nail on the head with the experience is what we get joy out of.
Right.
And we used to have to own these things in order to access that experience.
Yes.
And dude, it wasn't that long ago, 20 years ago. So over the last 20 years, we have been evolving to less ownership and more access. And I think this is just this article is a reaction to change. It's a reaction to this evolution that is happening, man. But again, those experiences that we want with a CD, with a book, yeah, dude, like we don't have to own a physical copy. We can access it anytime.
Yeah, and I'm not against ownership. I own some physical books. Yeah. I own a car, but I also have access to more books on my Kindle, and I also have access to Lyft or Uber if I want to, or those little bird scooters or whatever. Like there are other means of transportation, or the subway system here. I have the ability to have access to things without having to own everything. Yeah. You don't have a home gym in your home. You have access to the equipment that other people share. Right. You don't have to own every single weight that's in your gym, because I know you lift all the weights,
all
Ryan.
Of them. Yeah.
And
they got to pull weights out of the back to add more weight.
Anyway, back to this article here. The change in our relationship with physical objects does not stop there. We used to buy DVDs or video cassettes. Now viewers stream movies or TV shows with Netflix. Good! That is great!
I feel like an 85-year-old, like, angry baby
Luddite.
Wrote this.
Yeah. And I feel like his father may have written, like, an article about... how he was mad that 8 tracks were turning into cassette tapes or something.
Right.
Even the company's disc mailing service is falling out of favor. Good. What would I do with a DVD if you mailed one to me? You're mailing something to me, so you're wasting all this packaging, and by the way, it's going to take more people to ship the thing, and
the environmental costs alone are not worth it.
Absolutely. And so, yes, it's falling out of favor. Good. If you sent me a DVD, I would have to go buy a DVD player to play it.
Right.
I don't want to have to do that.
Yeah.
Music lovers used to buy compact discs. Now Spotify and YouTube are more commonly used to hear our favorite tunes. Yeah? I have access to all. I don't have to carry around this damn CD booklet, or I used to have a 50 disc CD changer in my trunk.
Yeah, dude.
And
it's crazy.
I have OCD, so I knew what was in all 50 disc slots.
Yeah, it was alphabetized.
The great American teenage dream used to be to own your own car. That is dwindling in favor of urban living, greater reliance on mass transit,
oh my God,
cycling, walking, and of course, ride-sharing services such as Uber and Lyft.
This whole article, it just made me think of like how. So you look at millennials, and they get such a bad rap, dude.
Yeah.
They get such a bad, they're lazy. They don't want to buy stuff anymore. They don't want to have to own a CD. This sounds like it is, I know they're not specifically targeting millennials, but it could be.
But they are by proxy.
By proxy, they are. And here's the thing, man, is that people nowadays, especially millennials, they want meaning in their life. They want to do something that is purposeful. They are not after, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to have a wife and 2.3 kids, and I'm going to have my own piece of land. And maybe if I get rich enough, I can have my own theater. I can have all these things to pacify me. That is what we have done as a culture over past post-industrial age. It's how much stuff can we get. How many pacifiers can we bring into our lives?
Right.
And ultimately, man, that's what I hear this article saying. People are cutting back on their pacifiers per se.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing, man.
Or also, people are sharing more frequently.
Right.
How is that about? Again, I go back to the gym analogy, right? There was a time that if you wanted exercise equipment, there was not generally a local place to go to work out.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there was, it was far away. And now there's access to gyms in pretty much every small town even.
Mm-hmm.
When we lived in Missoula, Montana, there's probably 10, 15, 20 different gyms there.
Dude, yeah. I mean, it had the nicest gym. Mar and I, we belong to like one of the nicest gyms in LA.
Mm-hmm.
When I say it's nice, it is it's clean, awesome staff, some pretty cool amenities.
Mm-hmm.
But like that doesn't even touch what we had in Missoula. Anyway,
yeah,
sorry, that was a little bit of a tangent.
Well, I think the nice thing is, imagine how much it would cost you to buy everything you use at the gym.
Yeah,
tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, then you'd also need the space to fill it, and you'd be the one taking care of it, and you'd be washing the towels, and I mean, all of these additional costs.
Yeah.
And so I say good to all of this. Each of these changes is beneficial, yet I worry that Americans are, slowly but surely, losing their connection to the idea of private ownership. Here's why I disagree with this. Soul Cycle class. You and I have gone to Soul Cycle. We talked about it last week on the podcast. Mm-hmm. After going to Soul Cycle several times, realized I'd like to do this more frequently, but I would like to do it when it's appropriately timed for me. Mm-hmm. And so Bex and I, after a month or 2 months actually of doing research and planning and making sure that we could afford it, we bought a Soul Cycle bike, basically. One that's actually better than you would use in a Soul Cycle class because it has like monitors and stuff. But
it's got like the workouts on the monitors.
Yes. Yeah. And also, but it tells you what your resistance is, what your cadence is.
Oh, instead of like just a little knob where you're like, yeah, this feels right.
You use the knob,
right.
But then it'll tell you like your resistance is 35. Now we're going to move that resistance up to 55.
Gotcha.
And so it's actually more helpful than the Soul Cycle class for me. But it's more helpful also because I can use it like if I want to use it at 7 o'clock in the morning or whenever, and I don't have to leave the house to do it. Yeah. And I'm doing it much more frequently as a result.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is a lot of people, well, you and I talked about the Seth Godin thing where his grandma bought the exercise equipment and she thought it would do the work for her.
Oh, yeah.
That's often the problem we have with a lot of ownership. And so having access to that Soul Cycle class was the reason that I brought this new bike into my life. I wouldn't have brought it into my life otherwise because I would be like, I'm not really sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. But once I started going to Soul Cycle, like, oh, this is beneficial to me, but I want a way to be able to do this in my house daily or every other day.
Right.
Then I decided to own the thing because it made sense for me. Yeah. The same thing with car ownership. I own a car because it makes sense for me. It doesn't make sense for everyone. And if it doesn't make sense for you, I applaud you. I say that's great. If I lived in Manhattan, it would be a burden for me to own a car. I'd rather have access and share that access with everyone else.
Just like you said, man, it sounds like we're going more towards a sharing community. There's nothing wrong with private ownership. We certainly aren't against that, as you just expressed with your exercise bike. But it can get dangerous with things like, nowadays, like, people want their own home theater. Mm-hmm. Like, you used to go to the theater and it was an experience, and you got out, you would see people in the community. I mean, it's not a very interactive experience with the community, but it was this way. It was this thing that would bring the community together a little bit more. Now people want to have their own private home theater, and that is that type of private ownership. It can just pull us away from being engaging with the community. So I again, dude, I totally love that we're heading towards a sharing community. Sharing market. The nation was based on the notion that private ownership gives individuals a stake in the system. I don't agree with that, but we'll talk about it. Read that sentence again.
The nation was based on the notion that private ownership gives individuals a stake in the system.
Wow. I
don't think that's what gave individuals a stake in the system. I think we come from a relative Puritan upbringing our country does, and the stake in the system was always hard work, right?
Right.
And
Not ownership. Yeah. That's
I think and now what I like to see the shift go toward instead of hard work is meaningful work.
absolutely, dude. Well, you know what though, man? That stake in the system with ownership, with private ownership of something, that is like a false sense of having a stake. It's like I don't know. I could liken it to on a day where maybe I don't get a whole lot done, but I've caught up on email and I've caught up on social media, and I feel like I got something done today, but really I didn't really get anything done.
There's nothing meaningful when we are just catching up on things.
That's another way to say it too, man. Is it might be, maybe it is a stake in our society, but it's not a very meaningful stake in our society.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. So someone tweeted me recently, or tweeted at the Minimalists, and said, well, I disagree with basically they said something about, I find this coffee mug that I have to be so meaningful.
Awesome.
And like they said it in a way that was almost like belligerent, and like, you guys are totally wrong. I find my coffee mug to be meaningful. And my response was, well, then, when you die, you should ask your family to bury you with it. Yeah. I mean, because here's the truth: we don't own anything ultimately, right? Like,
right.
We're just renting for the 80 years that we are here.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can pass those rentals on to a future generation or whatever. And that's what we want to talk about today is what does it mean to curate? So we're going to get back to this article here. It set Americans apart from feudal peasants, taught us how property rights and incentives operate. Totally disagree about that. Incentives operate not via physical goods, but we're incentivized to do all kinds of things that have nothing to do with private property or physical ownership of physical goods. Yeah. In fact, we don't pay people like Podcast Sean or Jordan No More over here. We don't
KNO W More, yeah.
KNO, yeah. Jordan No More. And we don't pay them in physical goods,
right?
Like, hey,
could you imagine if we just like gave you guys, here's a Casio watch. This is for your week's worth of work.
And Sean, here's a jar of jelly beans.
Right. Sean would Podcast Sean would love that jar of jelly beans.
Yeah, he would. His daughters would just take it from him anyway. So, we incentivize them we don't give them physical money even, right? Over 90% of the money that's in our country is digitized as well. It's zeros and ones.
Right.
They're incentivized by zeros and ones. And it's what those other zeros and ones get them. And quite often, it's not a physical good. It could be Spotify or whatever, right?
Yeah.
You're paying for Spotify with the zeros and ones that we gave you. And it was a kind of training for future entrepreneurship. No, today's entrepreneurs are often selling services, not physical goods. Do we not, as parents, give our children pets or other valuable possessions to teach them the basic lessons of life and stewardship? No, I've never given Ella a pet to teach her stewardship. We're hardly at a point where Americans' property has been abolished, but I am still nervous that we are finding ownership to be so inconvenient. Again, yes, we're talking about convenience, the convenience economy, the access economy. The reason that we live in a city is you walked here today. You didn't have to take a car.
Dude, ownership is inconvenient.
Quite often it is.
Dude,
and sometimes it is convenient.
We just, sometimes, but like we just moved. Mariah and I just moved to a new apartment. And I mean, it took the movers 4 hours, like from time of picking up our stuff to going 30 minutes across town, stopping at Podcast Sean's place to drop off a mattress that we didn't need anymore, then going to our place and loading everything up to our place. It took them 4 hours. That's convenient, man.
Yeah, and can you imagine if you were Colin Wright? He could move in 4 minutes.
Right.
And because he's not inconvenienced by all the stuff, right?
Right.
He owns 52 items or whatever it is, and that's it. By the way, check out Colin Wright on tour, becomingtour.com.
Owning a car is inconvenient, man. I mean, if I could do a rideshare everywhere I went and it wasn't ungodly expensive, I'd do that. In LA, having a car makes it a little bit better, a little less expensive getting from point A to point B.
Yeah.
But ultimately, dude, I hate owning a car. I got to change the oil in the thing, clean the thing. There's so many other aspects of owning a car besides just parking it in my garage and then using it when I need it. Yeah.
Insurance and all of these other things.
Dude, now I've got, I don't know you remember the little rust spot that was on the passenger side of the back door? It is like there's nothing there now because of the salt from the ocean.
Oh.
It's just like a matter of time before I got to do something. I either got to replace the door. I don't know. I got to do something about it. But anyway, just that one thing, dude. Like I was thinking about that last night. I'm like, if I didn't own a car, I wouldn't have to worry about this stupid rust spot.
Yeah. If you don't own a car, you don't have rust problems on your car.
Yeah.
What about your iPhone? That all essential life device. Surely you own that. Well, sort of. When Apple Inc. decides to change the operating software, sooner or later, you have to go along with what they have selected. Gmail is due to change its overall look and functionality, maybe for the better, but again, eventually, this choice will not be yours either. Yeah, I don't want to design the software for my Gmail account. I would prefer to let the experts, the curators, allow them to do that, because here's how the market works, Tyler. The market works that if we hate the thing, then we move on to something else. Skype has had this problem recently. They forced people to upgrade to whatever the new software system was. I mean, Microsoft got so many complaints that they actually had to go back and say, okay, we're gonna allow you to have this old version that's different from the mobile version. Yeah. That's how the market works, because if you don't like the thing, you move on to the better thing. Now, we can talk about how some companies develop a monopoly. That's a different kind of problem.
Right.
If it's YouTube, it's not a true monopoly, because you can put something, we could put this video on Vimeo. And so we could talk about maybe some of these things should be considered public utilities like Google or YouTube. I don't necessarily believe so, but I think there can be good arguments for that. That's completely different from the argument he's making here for physical ownership. Yes, I would prefer that Gmail figures out their interface instead of allowing me to design their interface for them.
Right. Unless you're like Derek Sivers, who has their own email.
Their own email, like
their own email server. Yeah. But again, though, like
that's his preference.
Yeah. And here's the thing, dude, is A, you have to have the knowledge on how to set that up, but B, you have to afford that. And, Gmail, this example that they're using, yes, like maybe we don't have full control over it. To your point, it's good we don't, because we don't understand how to make a email service. But it also makes it more accessible. Like Gmail's free.
Right. And if you don't like Gmail, you can use
another
Yahoo or Hotmail, or what are the other ones?
Yeah.
But there are a bunch of other ones.
Yeah,
out there
are.
well.
Absolutely.
I see people like with the, still have friends like in Cincinnati where they're cincy.rr.com.
There's plenty out there.
Imagine the Internet of Things penetrating our homes and more through services like Amazon's Alexa. Kill Ryan Nicodemus. We'll have ovens and thermostats that you set with your voice. That's pretty cool. And a toilet and a bathroom that periodically give you the equivalent of a medical checkup. Not true, but okay. Yes, you will still own the title to your physical house, but most of the value in that home you will, in essence, rent from outside companies, or in the case of municipal utilities, the government. I do get my water from the government, and you know what? That's okay, because I don't want to have to go to a well every day.
Yeah.
And get the water and then heat it up.
I would argue that anything we think we own anyways, I mean, if anything on a long enough timeline is ephemeral, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we really don't own anything anyway, man.
Right.
Like, it's all going to go away eventually. I mean, yeah, we could pass it down, but I would just argue that the concept of ownership, well, it's just that. It's a concept. And because people accept the concept, then yes, ownership is a thing. But ultimately, I mean, you're right. It's all borrowed.
Yeah. So I'm going to put, Sean, if you could put a link to this in the show notes. Here, I'll hand this over to you now so you have it. If you could put a link to that podcast, Sean, in the show notes. The rest of the article goes on. But that's our bit of a rant on ownership versus access. You know what? I am for both. I want to own certain things.
Yeah.
I want to have access to certain things. And I want that to change over time. Sometimes I might want to own a car, but there may be a point in time where I just want access to a car. Maybe I want to stop owning the thing altogether. Or I might want to own a house, or I might want to rent a house. That's access to a house. When we travel on tour, we have access to a room, either Airbnb or a hotel. I don't want to buy a house when I go to Nashville for a week.
Right.